Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C., one of the world's leading think tanks, at the conclusion of a panel discussion on national security space investment, taking a look at the FY19 budget with a lot of senior members of Congress, including the chairman of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee, Chairman Mike Rogers, Republican from the great state of Alabama. And we're here with the man, the myth, the legend, Todd Harrison, who heads the both the budget initiative, the budget project here, as well as the ASP, the really cool-sounding Aerospace Security Project. Here at CSIS. And for anybody who listens to our weekly podcast, the Defense and Aerospace Business Report is a regular on that. Todd, thanks very much for taking some time out of us, and I'm sure you've got to be relieved that the conference is over.
It's always a relief when an event comes to a conclusion. So yeah, now I'm chilling out of bed.
Yeah, it's a little bit like a wedding, but you've been doing a lot of these, so you guys are getting into a battle rhythm with it. Talk to us about, from your standpoint, what were the key takeaways that we heard? You know, 4 members of Congress here. We heard from Chairman Rogers. We heard from the ranking member on the Strategic Forces Subcommittee, Jim Cooper, Democrat from Tennessee. We also heard from Representatives Lamborn and Ruppersberger, Democrat from Maryland, of course, and the Republican from Colorado. Talk to us a little bit about what some of the messages are from all the speakers we heard today.
Yeah, the big message is that space has got to be a high priority. That's what's going on, what we see adversaries doing in space is really posing an increasing threat to our space systems and to overall national security, our ability to project power around the world. So we need to do more. The window is closing. Also, what we heard is that Congress has already done a lot to give DoD additional authorities, new authorities, and with the budget deal, more money. And so I think part of the message was it's over to DoD, it's over to the Air Force specifically to execute. And Congress is getting impatient. They want to see movement. They want to see clear timelines and programs to make our space systems more resilient, to bring in innovative technologies faster. They just need to see movement on that. The other thing we saw that was very clear from the panel discussions with the members of Congress is that the Space Corps idea and space reorganization in general is not dead. It is alive and well, and they're going to keep pushing this.
And we heard from both Rogers and Cooper that they're going to be pushing their Senate colleagues to drive into this so that it's only a matter of time before they get aboard on this. And it was also extraordinary the extent to which all the members of Congress really were pounding on the Air Force and the Air Force's stewardship of space. From the Air Force's perspective, hey guys, you know, challenging, there were a whole bunch of challenges, but we've been focused on this problem as the nation's military executive agent for space. 97% of, all space monies go to the Air Force, which runs the nation's satellite constellations. Do you think, and the Air Force was supposed to be here, and scheduling challenges, we understand, is what kept both the Secretary of the Air Force away, but also another space general officer. Talk to us a little bit about what the Air Force is doing right, but also what the Air Force is doing wrong to draw such ire from lawmakers.
Yeah, I mean, we see in this budget request that they are putting more money into space programs, particularly the Space Rapid Capabilities Office are getting a plus up in the budget, so they're doing some good things there, innovative things. They've got funding in there for rapid space launch, small satellite space launch, good programs there, trying to accelerate the follow-on satellite for missile warning, follow-on to the SIBRS program right now. So they are doing some things, trying to make some efforts. What doesn't seem to be working is, quite frankly, their outreach to the public and to the Hill to let people know what they're doing, that they're taking this seriously, that it really is a high priority for the Air Force and the current leadership, particularly the military leadership. It would have been great to have them here today so they could talk about it themselves. And so, it's unfortunate they weren't. So then you hear members of Congress beating up on them over this. But, they were invited, wish they could have been here. But yeah, so I think a lot of it is they've got to show the Hill that they really are engaged, that they really have this, and they're making changes. And I think that's what the Hill wants to see, is that they're making changes, they're going to do things differently.
And we should say, in the spirit of full disclosure, that you were an airman as well. You were an officer in the United States Air Force. And we were talking about uniforms earlier, because there was a very funny exchange, depending on how you want to look at it, where Chairman Rogers was saying, Really, the uniform isn't a problem, although I'm not sure the U.S. Air Force uniform in black is the right way to go.
I would go with gray, but you know, if you're going to make a Space Corps, go with a gray uniform. Yeah.
And then you can't call him an airman, so you'd have to call him Spaceman First Class.
That's going to be the hardest part to figure out. Well, you don't want to go with a gendered term either, right? So you got sailor, marine, airman is the only gendered term really that's left. So you need to come up with a gender-neutral term that's not about air, that's about space. That could take years to figure out.
They could call him specimen. Never mind. It was a right stuff for us. The specimen.
There's also on 30 Rock. Never mind.
Yeah, there is. Never mind. We should have actually the humorous version of this program where we could delve into these matters. Let's get Andrew down here, and it'll be a laugh riot a minute. But more focused, right? We've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but I want to ask you, because we had a great dissection of the space budget by Mike Turney of Jacques and Associates, an independent consultant, but he works with Jacques and Associates, who was one of your co-sponsors here for the event. This window, this funding window issue, that if the department's going to have 2 years of funding, as some members of Congress fear, but most clearly illustrated by Adam Smith, the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, who has a very genuine fear that a lot of inflationary but also debt-related issues are going to come to a head in a couple of years and constrict the budget. From your standpoint, looking at the space budget, are the priorities in the right places, and is the department doing the right things to get as much capability under its belt, or moving at least in this very, very short window, so that if funding flattens or relatively declines, the department's still going to be on the right right track, given the magnitude of the challenge of reinvigorating the U.S. space enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, at a macro level, the challenge is that the budget deal that we got is a 2-year deal, right? And we're already halfway through the first year of that deal, 2018, right? So we have a deal for the rest of this year and for FY19. After that, the budget caps are still in the law at the original level for 20 and 21. So they have to get another deal. Now, I'd be a little more optimistic that another deal, that we're going to be able to reach it, because this deal raised the cap so high that basically re-baselined the debate for the future. So sure, I think they can probably squeak out another deal at the last minute, about 2 years from now. But after that, all bets are off. And I think, looking at the overall federal budget, the picture's not good. That the deficits are growing. By next year, the deficit is going to be over $1 trillion a year. It's going to be higher than the deficit was back in 2011, which is what prompted Congress to enact the Budget Control Act to begin with. So, yeah, in the long term, we know defense budgets are cyclic. It goes up, it goes down. So your point of, are they doing the right things now to use the buildup effectively? I think, unfortunately, they did not. To do the right things now, they would have to have already been starting programs years ago and have them ready to go into production so they can buy them now with the money. They didn't start programs years ago, and so they are just now at the point of initiating some new programs or thinking about initiating new programs. And so it very well may be that by the time they're actually ready to execute on those programs and start buying things in quantity, that we're already entering another down budget cycle. So, time is of the essence here.
One of the things that came up was classification. Almost everything that folks discuss about space or American national security capabilities, especially shortfalls, the inclination and especially the guidance from Secretary Mattis has been, shut up and don't talk about it. Whereas Bill LaPlante, who was the former Air Force Acquisition Chief, said, hey, look, the Russians know what they're doing. We have to be much more honest to sort of propel a national dialogue about why this is important. We've seen some people do that. General Hyten did that, at the time the space commander, but now the strategic commander. But that was with approval to sort of get out and start telling that story and delivering that message. As a budgeteer, are we going to have enough money to do a reinvigoration of the space architecture? We're looking at missile defense and the missile warning satellites. Your colleague Tom Carrico made a great point that all of these replacement satellites, everybody's agreed to on paper, but there is no new missile warning satellite. They're all Cold War technology and assets. If you look at it, the nuclear enterprise needs a reinvigoration. That's a more than $1 trillion bill associated with that. I mean, how is the department going to do this? Especially, when you looked at Mike Turney's slides, one of the things he pointed out there is $533 billion is going to service the debt, and it's $648 billion for the defense budget. So we're getting perilously close, right, Talk to us a little bit about, as somebody who delves in the budget and has all the conversations here, is this even doable at a fundamental level, even if you reform the heck out of your acquisition system?
So I think the truth is we're spending $700 billion a year on defense. You ought to be able to do a hell of a lot more with $700 billion a year than we're doing now. There are reasons that we aren't able to do more, and a lot of those are political, but a lot of it is just about making tough decisions. And so I think what we ought to be focused on is, what do you cut? I know that's very counterintuitive when the budget's going up, but we need to be focused on what can we cut, what can we get rid of. My former boss, Andrew Krepanevich, wrote this great article about the Pentagon's wasting assets. I love to quote it all the time because it's so true. We have so many wasting assets, legacy weapon systems that are not well suited to fight the wars of the future. Many of them aren't even well suited to fight the wars of today. We're holding on to them for various political reasons. Sometimes it's out of just nostalgia. We can't seem to let them go. We need to let go of some things, right? You need you need to get rid of your legacy force structure. You need to look at your op tempo, the current operating environment, and say, hey, are we overstretching our force? Are we trying to do too much right now around the world? Can we do less? Can we start saying no to something? It's not about abandoning allies or anything that extreme. Are there things that we can just say, you know what? Those aren't essential. That's not essential to our national security. It's not essential to the security of our allies. We can do less, or we're not going to get involved in this situation, at least not militarily. We'll engage economically, we'll engage diplomatically, but we don't always have to send military forces or even be present around all the time. So can we do less, in terms of our op tempo? Can we jettison some legacy weapon systems? If you can start to do those things, then you can protect yourself, even in a downturn, that you can adequately fund these modernization initiatives that really are needed, not just in space, but in other areas as well.
And where would you take a little bit of risk on that? What are the programs that, for example, look, folks come back to the A-10. The joke I've made with people is that the United States Air Force will keep that airplane in service now for another 200 years to make sure that nobody ever complains about A-10s going away. What are some of the choices you would make? What would be some of the trade-offs that you'd be willing to make?
I would go through the inventory of aircraft in the Air Force and start looking at the oldest ones and saying, do I have good alternatives already in the force? Do I really need these? And I would also look at small fleets and say, do I really need these, or can I do the same mission with some other aircraft? And then look at a lot of the modernization programs. Do you always need to buy the next generation of the same system, or are there some weapon systems where we're kind of topping out? We're near the best of what you'll ever really be able to do. You either stick with that or you jump to a totally different technology. So where can we make some of those jumps?
For example, what the Air Force is doing on Joint Stars, right?
Yep.
Instead of looking for another sort of high-value, low-density asset, is there another way we can do this mission?
Let's do the mission in a different way. It's an important mission. You don't want to, create a gap there. But can we do the mission in a different way in the future that actually ends up being more effective? And so look for opportunities like that. But Congress has got to get on board and say, okay, we will let you retire some things. And it's not just the Air Force either, the Navy as well. We have to be ready and willing to actually retire some things and let them go. Even though the A-10 is a great aircraft, it served us well in the past. It's time to move on, and we have to be willing to do that.
Todd Harrison, defense budget and space analyst extraordinaire here at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thanks very much. We really appreciate it, and looking forward to having you on next week's podcast.
Thanks for coming over, Vago.